Now look, I'm generalizing and this is me just talking personally, but when it comes to horror, a bad horror movie is usually more entertaining than a bad drama or a bad comedy, because when it comes to those genres, when they are bad, they are just fucking boring. And another reason why that's kind of a generalization and I don't strictly feel it across the board is because I think that is only true of horror movies from like the 70s, 80s, 90s, and then like the early 2000s. Modern horror now, if modern horror is boring or it's bad, it doesn't feel fun because it doesn't carry with it that very special word and that very special feeling, which is nostalgia. The word nostalgia over the last few years has kind of had like a negative connotation because people view it as just like cheap. It's like these movies that lean into nostalgia instead of telling good stories and instead of developing good characters, and I think that is fair. But when I'm talking about nostalgia, I'm not talking about like, oh, a cameo from a character people loved or like a moment that's like fan service and calls back to a previous movie. I'm talking about the feeling. When you watch like a low budget 80s horror movie, I can definitely feel like I'm there. I can project my mind to it so easily. And obviously that's because I grew up with horror movies. I grew up with a lot of bad horror movies. And so my mind will connect movie to my actual childhood experience. And I make that connection and then I feel it deeply. But I think there's something specific about horror that mines that feeling out of people. And I don't know if it's like the fright. I don't know if it's the suspense. I don't really know what it is. But there's something there that makes a bad horror movie at the very least entertaining. And again, I'm talking about low budget horror movies from like the 70s, 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. I don't think modern horror can hold that kind of nostalgia because our cameras look good now and nothing is really shot on film. And at the very least, a bad horror movie is going to look like a movie or it's going to look like just a very cheap like YouTube short. I think bad cameras and bad film stock really add to horror movies more than any other genre. A bad drama that is shot poorly and has terrible film stock and the camera's terrible, you're just gonna look at and be like, oh, this is like a forgettable TV movie that you would have watched at like, I don't know, 2 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon at your grandmother's house. But a horror film with that same film stock and that same filming technique has a much deeper and more complex vibe because horror is supposed to feel scuffed. It's supposed to feel not perfect. It's not supposed to look pretty and clinical and clean. It's supposed to look a bit unreal and unnatural, and I love that those horror movies capture that feeling. I really feel like that's a point in time that we will always look back on and be like, wow, we captured something there. The atmosphere, the feeling, the vibe of that time and the way those cameras were used is relegated just to that period of time, and I don't think you can capture it again. Howling 4 is not a good movie, and in fact it's a very boring movie, and it's a movie where werewolves don't show up in it until like the hour mark, but because it is so low budget and because of how it looks, it has this otherworldly, ethereal kind of feeling for me, and granted that is my own nostalgia, that I just think is like so encapsulates horror. Where The Howling creates a very intentional atmosphere that is like well crafted and very diligently made, The Howling 4 almost does it completely on accident. Between the location and the sound design and the scuffed cinematography, there is a vibe there that is just like, you cannot capture that again these days. And look, I'm not one of those people that's like, oh, they don't make them like they used to, but that kind of vibe, you can never capture again.
God, give me strength!
And I think there's something really special there in those kind of low budget horror movies. There is a clear attempt to make something, and even though the acting's bad, and even though the effects look terrible, there is a nostalgia there. There is an atmosphere there, and it feels like they've crafted something special, even when the overall product, you know, if you were reviewing it really critically, is not very good. Or even boring at times, and don't get me wrong, there are plenty of examples of this era of horror movies that are just fucking boring, and no matter how good that kind of nostalgic element is, it doesn't carry the movie. here. I'm a big believer in the idea of like moving forward and living your life and not being weighed down by the past so much that you forget to live the present. But on the other hand, I think it's just as important to like hold on to the things that we loved, hold on to the things that we watched as a kid and it meant something to us, hold on to that feeling. And so for me, there's almost nothing better than sitting down on a weekend and putting on one of these scuffed 80s or 90s like monster horror movies and just being cast back to that time. For me, I will look at these movies and I'll look at the locations and I can imagine myself going there now and be like, wow, this is where they filmed Pumpkinhead 2. That feeling for me is like the truest representation of creativity. It's seeing a location and feeling a story. And obviously that's very easy to do when you're watching a movie and they've filmed these locations and you are watching a story. Obviously it's very easy to see a story when you're watching it, but those kind of low budget horror movies are just so creative and I can see the scene. I can see that they didn't have a big budget and they went out somewhere and they tried to make something that fucking mattered. And horror being such a tight-knit community, it kind of still does matter. The horror community holds on to these things with like such esteem that they're never forgotten. And I think again, it's because people remember that feeling and they want to capture that feeling and remember even the worst horror movies for the fact that they did that, the fact that they created that atmosphere, the fact that they created that feeling for people. And I think that is fucking awesome. I don't know that I've really made a point there. There was like a clear idea in my head and I don't know that I've articulated it very well, but in my defense, it's been a really bad week. If what I said here made any sense, let me know if you agree or disagree down in the comments. I tried. Got some really cool things coming up in the next couple weeks, especially a big project that I've been working on with someone. I can't wait to get to that. That'll be really cool. So if you haven't subscribed yet and you're still here, which is probably no one, but please subscribe. All right, I'm out of here. See ya. What do I say? Thanks for watching and I'll see you next week.